Section 2.2 is on simple interest and compound interest. These two types of interest differ in how the amount of money you earn is calculated. For simple interest, which is what we're looking at for this first problem, simple interest is calculated based only on the principal amount or the original or starting amount. And we are going to call, in this case, principal amount P. So whatever your principal amount is, you can calculate your interest based on that amount, and then that's how much interest you earn. If we are looking at a situation like this one where you borrow $100 from a friend and agree to pay 5% in interest, and we want to know how much interest you're going to end up paying your friend back. This is a one-time payment of interest. And it's simple interest because you just pay the 5% based on the amount that you borrow. So we have some formulas here that help us determine the amount of interest you're going to pay. And that's this first formula here. The amount of interest that you're going to pay is just taking the principal amount and multiplying it by the interest rate. And then if you want to find how much total is being paid back, because you have to pay back the $100 you borrowed plus the interest that you owe your friend now. That is represented with the letter A. We call that our future value, which is the ending amount. And the future value is the principal plus the interest. And so you take your principal plus your interest to get your future value. So let's figure out how much the interest is for this situation, and then how much the future value or total amount of the loan will cost you. So in this case, this $100 that we're going to borrow is going to be our principal amount. We're going to call that P. And then we have our interest rate. Now the interest rate is given to us in percentage. However, in order to use these formulas, we need to have a number, like a whole number, a fraction, a decimal, that kind of thing. And so we can't actually use a percent. And so we're going to convert this percent into a decimal. And we do that by moving the decimal place 2 places to the left, adding zeros as needed. Now that we have our principal amount and our interest rate, that's all we need for our formula. So we can calculate the interest by plugging those into our equation. So our principal amount is 100, and we're going to multiply that by our interest rate, giving us that we're going to pay $5 in interest. Now, that $5 will be paid back in addition to the principal amount. So in order to know our future value, which we represent as A, we need to take the principal amount, add it to the interest rate, and that will give us our total amount that we're going to pay back. So in this case, the interest is $5 and the future value is $105. So in some cases, we have simple interest that we're going to actually pay over time. So instead of having a one-time payment like the last example, you're paying this interest for 5 years, 3 months, 12 years, whatever the case is, depending on what kind of loan it is. When that happens, we use a slightly different formula here. Notice we have the variable T, and that T represents the amount of time that has passed that you're paying that interest for. And so in this problem, it says, suppose your city is building a new park and issues bonds to raise money to build it. You pay $2,000 for a bond that pays 3% simple interest and matures in 5 years. How much interest will you earn? What is the future value of the bond? So we're going to pull out the information we're given. This $2,000 is going to be our principal amount, and the 3% is our rate, which is going to be 0.03 or 3/100 if we move that decimal 2 places to the left. And then the thing that's different between this problem and the last one is that we're getting paid this interest multiple times over time. So we're actually being paid this for 5 years. And so that is our T. If we were going to have this bond for only 1 year, all we would need to do is multiply 2,000 by our rate, and it would give us 60. But we're actually going to do this for 5 years. And so in order to find the interest rate, we actually need to multiply the principal times the rate times the amount of time that passed. So 2,000 times 3/100 times 5 years. So that's at $60 a year, but for 5 years, which would be $300 in interest. To find our future value, that is once again the principal amount plus the interest amount. Well, the principal was $2,000, and we just calculated the interest to be $300, giving us $2,300 for our future value of this bond. So we paid $2,000 for this bond to help them build their park. And when we return the bond in 5 years, we actually are going to receive $2,300 back for our investment in helping build this new park. Now, we have this thing called annual percentage rate that is used a lot in different types of loans. And the thing about an annual percentage rate is it tells you how much that rate is for an entire year. However, your loan, your bond, your savings account, whatever situation you're looking at, may not be accumulating interest on a yearly basis. And so we want to make sure that when we're given our rate, whether it's an annual percentage rate or any other type of rate, we want the rate to reflect what our pay period is. This one says, suppose you buy a $3,000 federal bond with a 2.5% simple interest rate paid semi-annually, which will mature in 4 years. How much interest will you earn after 6 months? How much interest will you earn in general? How much total interest will you earn? And what will be the future value of the bond? So there's 3 different things it's asking us to do here. The first thing it's asking is to find interest in 6 months, and then total interest, and then the future value of the bond. So let's pull out the information we're given. The principal amount is $3,000, and then we have this 2.5%. Now this tells us that is an annual simple interest rate. So this is actually my APR, not necessarily my rate that we're going to use in our formula for each period. It's the rate for the entire year. Now, as we read further, it says that this bond is paid semi-annually. So even though our interest rate is annually, the payment happens twice a year. So this is actually happening twice, which means that our rate is actually not going to be 2.5% for one period of time. So we'll look at that in a moment. I do want to pull out one last thing, which is this one here, which is our T, because we are going to have this bond for 4 years. It takes 4 years for it to fully mature, for us to get our full value of the interest we are owed. So going back to the annual percentage rate, or APR, in order to find our rate for each period, which is semi-annually, twice a year, I need to actually take my annual percentage rate, my APR, and divide it by 2, because this APR is for a full year, but we are getting interest twice a year. So I want to know what my interest rate is for just one period. Now, a lot of times students want to go ahead and divide this out. When we talk about money, we want it to stay as accurately as possible. So we're going to leave that fraction there, especially because as these problems get more complicated, we're going to start using spreadsheets. And so we're going to just leave that there. Our calculators, if you have a scientific calculator, can handle that fraction, no problem. So the first thing says we want the amount of interest every 6 months. 6 months is the paid semi-annually. So that's one pay period, which means I'm just using the very first formula because we are just trying to figure out what is the amount of interest being paid that one time. And we're multiplying our principal by our interest rate to get that we are going to earn $37.50 each pay period, or each 6 months. The second thing is wanting us to know the total interest. So that's for the every single time that we are earning this interest. So this is the total interest. We can use our formula to get that one. And we said that the T is 4. However, one thing that we are missing here is this T is 4 years. Within those 4 years, there are 2 pay periods each year. So we do want to multiply by 2 as well. And that's going to give us $300. So once again, this 2 is twice a year. And this 4 is over 4 years. And the last thing we want to figure out is our total value is when we add the principal amount with the interest earned, and that's going to be $3,300.